Any questions? Could you use the mic over there? It would be the best thing.
Yeah. I guess it strikes me as a little, I'm not sure what word I'm blocked on. Let me phrase it differently. You talked about how we should be doing controlled and thoughtful development of our energy resources, because the alternative, which is unplanned growth and has all this risk, is probably bad and nefarious, and I agree with that. And if that slide were your only slide, that would probably be great, but you just went through this whole presentation. At the end of it, you said, basically, we have no idea what the consequences of this kind of meddling in the Earth's ecosystem would produce. And furthermore, what you didn't say was that these climate models are not even necessarily accurate representations of the Earth's system. So, yeah, all that's true, but I don't see that you've proven or even suggested that geoengineering is even a sane thing to do without some sort of science behind it. You know, you could build a simulation of anything and say, look at these graphs it produces.
Yeah. I mean, what can I say? I can say that these climate models are the same climate models that are used to predict what might happen from continued CO2 emission. And, you know, it's known that these models are deficient. And I mean, that's why we don't know how much warming there'll be. And you also, you know, and I think I said several times that we would anticipate that it wouldn't work the way the models say, that there would be surprises. But now some of these simulations have been done in a number of different models, and also there are some basic physics reasons why it seems it works. And one of the main things is that it turns out that sea ice is a really important component in the climate system, in that if you have sea ice in the winter in high latitudes, that insulates the atmosphere from the ocean and allows the atmosphere to get very cold. And if you melt the sea ice, then in the summertime all kinds of heat can run into the ocean, and in the wintertime the heat can run out of the ocean. And it seems that, and those heat fluxes associated with having sea ice or not having sea ice can be on the order of 100 watts per square meter, whereas the radiative forcing from CO2 doubling is, say, 4 watts per meter squared. And so if you get the sea ice back to where it is, then you get these sort of 100 watt per square meter fluxes back to where they were before, and the climate gets closer to its base state. Now, you know, I don't think, you know, the reason, I mean, I think people who've been talking about this would say, okay, well, in the polar winter, the air mixes vertically in this winter time, and so if you threw some particles in the spring, they would presumably get rained out in the next winter. Now, I'm not advocating doing this, but the people who are advocating doing it, who would say, okay, you would start, you know, with this kind of phase thing, then see what happens. If nothing bad happens, then try it for 2 years, 3 years. If it works good, you extend it. So I think even the people who think it's ready to deploy these kind of things would see some kind of phased and gradual phase, and so there'd be some feedback, so you see if something bad is happening. Myself, I think if you tried anything like this, where there's something short of mass famine in the developed world, that you would have so many protesters in the street and people would lose elections. That I think a politician who said, oh, let's spray particles in the stratosphere, I don't think that's going to win them elections. So, I think that it would not, my guess is it won't get deployed unless there's real, like, starvation in the developed world. Okay, but I think by then the danger is that a politician will go and do something crazy, like maybe he'll put this, there'll be such political demand to do something that they'll start spraying sulfate particles all over the place, and then maybe something really disastrous would happen. And so I think it's worth doing the research up front to have some idea of what might happen, but I don't think it would get deployed in a practical sense outside of something pretty clearly catastrophic going on. But that's just my own personal view. Yes?
I was just wondering, given the examples you were showing of having the sort of targeted aerosol, like over just the Arctic cap, etc. How would you keep the particles isolated once they're up in the stratosphere? I'm just wondering.
This was idealized. They wouldn't really stay that. In fact, Phil Roche has recently done a simulation with particles and they would, basically, the general stratospheric circulation is, upwelling at the equators and downwelling at the poles, and so to a first approximation, if you put something in at some latitude, it would tend to go north and go down, but it doesn't. There's sort of quasi-diffusion, and it wouldn't really be as neat as this, is the answer. Anything else? Okay, so maybe we'll hold it there. Thank you for your attendance.